Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Read RWBY After the Fall with your host Remy McNeil of Celtic Phoenix Productions. In our last session we got through the prologue and chapter 1, which was much more lengthy than I had taken account. I think I was also very tired. I had not eaten, I was underhydrated. There was a lot of reasons why I ran short. I'm hoping to get much further into this book today. Now, last time our intrepid heroes killed some crab monsters that weren't grim. Yay. And we learned a number of things, like the fact they walked to goddamned vacuo. Why would you walk? I mean, honestly. Hey folks, how's it going? Sorry for putting on that facade for so long. I've already eaten a hearty dinner before this, so I should have the energy I need to go through. Hopefully my voice holds out. I have a second bottle of water on standby, just in case. I don't really know if there's much to address. I'm very excited to get back into this. I thought you were watching Celtic Phoenix, not British. I love doing a British accent. They are fun. Now, hopefully I can keep my accents consistent between these books, between these installments. It's kind of a trick sometimes trying to do that. But there's not really much else we need to do at the moment. I think it's fine if we just jump right into it. I have a fan going right now. Let me know if you guys are... You can probably hear it a little bit. I know it's picking up on the audio. I have a fan going because it is incredibly hot in here. And it gets very hot when I'm wearing all this getup. This getup is very, very toasty. So if it's getting too loud, let me know and I'll turn it off, or I'll lower it. I will turn it off. It's on its lowest setting. And let's just jump right into it because I'm excited. I want to read more of this. Chapter 2. And it has an outline of Beacon on the page, if you can see that. The first years had been at Beacon for barely a day, and they were all about to die. The 20 or so new students were currently flying through the air over the Emerald Forest. More like falling, really. And if they did nothing to slow or cushion their fall, they would certainly go splat. In about 50 seconds. Even if they survived the fall, they would be in a forest lousy with creatures of Grimm left to fend for themselves. A real Celt Phoenix would take the heat. Look, son, I am an Irishman. The Phoenix is just a symbol. 50 seconds was plenty of time to consider the choices that had been brought each one of them there. Plenty of time to regret them. Coco Adele had no regrets. She was loving initiation so far. This is why Beacon Academy had been her first choice of school. Professor Osmond had a reputation for being very mysterious and a bit reckless with his students. Coco liked a challenge. So, Fat Man, if you're wondering, it is canon that people know that Osmond's kind of a reckless, loose cannon. Besides, Vale had been her home all her life. She still wasn't sure what to make of Ozpin. The youngest headmaster Beacon had ever had, he had a mischievous streak and a boyish charm that reminded Coco of her younger brother. But at the same time, Ozpin seemed oddly ancient, not just because of his silver hair, but because of how he always stood tall, how he talked like he meant much more than he was saying out loud. Professor Glinda Goodwitch, on the other hand, was a strong leader Coco aspired to be. She might have been Ozpin's second in command, but she gave the sense that she was the one in charge. She was a bit severe, utterly humorless, and her body language said that she was all business. And to top it off, she was also hot, with impeccable fashion sense. Her whole outfit worked, with that blouse, the pencil skirt, the cape, those heels. And she seemed very comfortable with who she was. The fact that Goodwitch clearly respected Ozpin somehow conferred even more authority onto him than his title. Coco prepared to land, assessing the tree line ahead and all her options. She yawned. Okay, maybe she had one regret. Even though being flung off a cliff kind of woke you up and got your adrenaline flowing, she wished she had a second cup of coffee at breakfast. 40 seconds. About 20 feet away from Coco, also falling, Velvet Scarlatina had some regrets. She couldn't believe that on her second day at Beacon, the headmaster, Professor Ozpin, had catapulted the entire first-year class into the Grim-infested forest. Toward a Grim-infested forest. There was still the little matter of landing in it safely. But more than Grim, Velvet was worried about who she should be partnered with. Everyone had known they would have a partner for their 4 years at Beacon, but Velvet had thought that she had some control over who it would be. Turned out it was going to be completely random. Each of you will be given teammates today, Professor Osborne had said. These teammates will be with you for the rest of your time at Beacon, so it is in your best interest to be paired with someone who you can work well with. That said, the first person you make eye contact with after landing will be your partner for the next 4 years. What? Velvet said. If she had a choice, which apparently she didn't, she would have chosen Coco Adele. They both come to Beacon from Pharaoh's combat school, so Velvet knew her. Sort of. Coco probably had no idea who Velvet was, but Velvet knew all about her. Coco had been popular at their school, breaking performance records and breaking girls' hearts. I remember reading this passage from the previews. Even from 20 feet away, Velvet could see Coco was falling with style. It wasn't only because of her shades, but because of her whole form. She wasn't slowly tumbling in the air like most of their classmates. She had her feet pointed towards the ground as if she expected to land just like a cat. As far as Velvet knew, Coco wasn't hiding cat ears under that beret, though. One hand was keeping the hat on her head, the other was at her waist holding her purse. And Coco was smiling. Anyone who could look completely confident and happy while plummeting onto the ground at 32 feet per second was someone you wanted on your side. Mostly, Velvet knew that she didn't want to be paired with who she didn't want to be paired with. At the top of her list was a tall dude from Mistral. Less than a day, and Velvet was already been bullied by some of the upperclassmen at Beacon for being a faunus, and of course her tormentors were from Mistral. Velvet loved her ears, which only made it worse when people called her Bunny Girdle, or made those awful jokes she heard hundreds of times from the harmless but hurtful hop to it jabs to the squicky comments that made her feel threatened. The boys who joked about hunting rabbits, or asked if she could teach them multiplication. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. I'm liking this. This is funny stuff, and actually true to more real-life racism. So this writer's gotten the racism stuff a little bit better than Miles and Carrie has. The big kids hadn't said anything like that to her yet, but his people didn't like Faunus and didn't mind letting them know how they felt. Thinking about working with him for 4 years, Velvet didn't want a partner at all. She'd never had any close friends before, and besides, everyone managed to disappoint her sooner or later. 30 seconds. The big kid, Yatsuhashi Daichi, knew more about being bullied than anyone could have ever guessed. He'd always been the big kid growing up, and because of his size, most people had assumed he was stupid or they were scared of him. Other kids didn't want to play with him, thinking he would hurt them, either accidentally or intentionally. Consequently, Yatsuhashi had grown up afraid of what he might do, always self-conscious about his size, his strength, and his semblance, especially around his parents and little sister, who were pretty much his only real friends. Yatsuhashi tried to keep his mind free of distracting thoughts like these as he fell, eyes closed and arms crossed over his chest. The wind whistled past his ears, and he blocked out the sound out too, trying to imagine himself floating like a leaf on the wind. Really, we're making. Is that supposed to be a Firefly reference, a Serenity reference? That wasn't making him any lighter, but meditation did leave him clear-eyed and ready to handle the situation, which was going to resolve pretty soon, one way or another. He was always thinking several steps ahead, but until he actually met his partner, he couldn't see his path to the abandoned temple in the forest and the relics that Professor Osborne had tasked them with finding. Yatsu didn't like leaving anything to chance, and the next 4 years at Beacon had a big question mark hanging over them. The events of today would have tremendous impact on his huntsman training and likely set his course for the rest of his life. He wondered how such a momentous decision could be left to chance. No. Yatsu opened his eyes. He had to take control of the situation. This was too important to let the whims of a professor or fate or the gods decide. Yatsu thought about the classmates he had researched and who would make good partners. He ranked them and then picked out the coordinates as they descended towards the Emerald Forest. He made up his mind quickly, already angling his body into position and considering how to get himself to the ground as safely at exactly the right moment. 20 seconds. Today was the day Fox Alistar had been waiting for, not just since enrolling at Beacon, but for practically his whole life. So far, it was kind of a disappointment. Growing up as an orphan in Vacuo, he'd never had a permanent home, or even a permanent people in his life. His tribe, the Kenyte, Kenyte, I can't pronounce that. Kenyte, the tribe his parents had belonged to, had taken care of Fox communally. He was grateful for all the sacrifices it took to raise him, but he knew he didn't truly belong here. He had given up a lot of thought to the place he would want to call home and the family he wanted one day. As he had survived the tense, quiet years in the desert, he knew he would become a huntsman one day. He'd always been drawn to Vale, which seemed to be the opposite of everything he had grown up with. Lush plant life, plenty of water and food, friendly people, fewer things trying to kill you on a daily basis. Vale sounded like a nicer, stable place to settle down and make a life without the constant fear of encountering Grim, or worse. Vacuo was probably the one place in Remnant where some of the natural wildlife could be considered more dangerous than the creatures of Grim. He figured this whole wild initiation thing must be some kind of ill-conceived hazing for first years. They couldn't really assign students to each other so randomly. That would be almost as bad as how nomadic tribes in the settlements formed back home. That was probably something the professors did to make the exercise more interesting, and Fox was 100% sure Ozpin wouldn't actively put his students' lives in jeopardy on their first outing, without adult supervision. Not that Fox needed the help, of course, but still, Fox hadn't even signed any kind of liability waiver. No liability waiver? For a Huntsman Academy? I mean, that's a good joke. That's a very good joke, but that's horrifying. God, Beacon must be getting sued left and right. No wonder it got Ozpin wanted it to fall, so you didn't have to deal with all that legal bullshit. Fox wondered what Ozpin had been thinking when he decided to throw a blind boy off a cliff. He thought it seemed a tad irresponsible, but then again, Ozpin also seemed to like someone who appreciated a good joke. And that's all this was, a joke. For his part, Fox liked the practical jokes too, especially when he was the prankster. Okay, so I was actually kind of on point with Fox's personality. Interesting. Maybe a little harsher on my version, but his being a prankster is interesting. But on the off chance that some or all of the scenario was exactly as advertised, it was time to get serious. Fox flipped forward in the air and pointed himself headfirst in the direction he was falling. He tapped the almost invisible earbud in his ear to activate voice commands on the scroll in his belt. Ada, engage proximity alert, silent mode. Engaged, the accessibility dialogue assistant said, in its female monotone voice at its lowest volume. His scroll immediately began buzzing in periodic pulses, increasing the intensity the closer he got to the forest. When you have that, I guess it makes sense you activated halfway through the fall. Fox relied on his aura for more than just shielding or special boosted attacks like most people. It was one of the ways he could orient himself in his environment without vision. His semblance allowed him to track where his classmates were in relation to him, at least over short distances. But since they were basically strangers, all he had was a strong impression of their presence. There were very few people Fox had known well enough to pinpoint their locations more precisely, and they were all back in Vacuo or dead. His scroll buzzed steadily. Fox crooked his arm over the blade of his weapon, sharp retribution. Fox crooked his arms so the blades of his weapon, sharp retribution, were ahead and extended to either side of him, just as he breached the canopy of trees. He grimaced with the impact as they sliced through the tree tops, but his aura held and his momentum slowed. Trees cracked and snapped in his wake as he cut his way through the forest, Ada continuing to send out pulses that helped him feel his way through the canopy. It was exhausting. Around him in the distance he heard gunfire, explosions, trees crashing as his classmates found their own methods of arresting their descent. When he had slowed down enough, he brought his arm up and hooked the blades around a thick tree branch. He spun himself around several times, stripping away bark and cutting into the wood before he jabbed his elbows downward and launched himself up and over into a higher branch. He grabbed it with both hands for momentum, then let go, falling at a much more manageable speed towards another branch a little lower. As the trees grew wider, and closer towards the ground, he sprung from a branch and kicked off a tree trunk, landing lightly on a lower branch. Drop, kick, grab, spin, flip. Fox landed at a crouch. Yes! Too bad no one saw that, he said. Someone clapped behind him. He felt a nearby presence in his mind, and he smelled chocolate and caramel. He turned to meet his partner for the next 4 years. Ah. Nothing changed. I hit some buttons there accidentally with the bug. I hit it with a bug. Just before Coco reached the top of the forest, she flicked the purse and unfolded it into her Gatling gun. Gyanduja. Coco swung the massive weapon under her and pointed the muzzle down. She braced it between her knees. Oh my. She fired gravity dust rounds and hoped no people or harmless animals, were in the way as the bullet shredded leaves and wood. Enhanced by her semblance, the gravity dust slowed her fall. And for a moment she hovered in zero gravity, hanging in mid-air, and then she began drifting down slowly into the forest. The world was dark under the canopy, especially with sunglasses on. As she fell and picked up more speed, she yanked her gun up in front of her and angled it towards the ground again, mowing down trees just a moment before she would have slammed into them. Her designer shades protected her eyes, but the splinters lacerated her face, and she tasted sawdust and smoke. The recoil slowed her fall even more. When she saw an opening in the tree, she pressed the release switch and collapsed the artillery back into its fashionable accessory that no trendy huntress should be without. Holding onto the strap of the purse, she flung it out and caught it on a branch, forming a slingshot around the limb. The bough bent and then broke, and she was falling again, only slightly out of control. She used the purse again to lasso another branch, this time spinning herself around the tree trunk, letting it go and repeating the maneuver in the other direction. She slung through the... I'm trying to imagine this. She's using the strap of the purse to Spider-Man through the trees. She landed on the ledge of the new... where was I? Yep. She slung through and down the trees in this way until she neared the forest floor. Then she opened the gun again and fired another round straight down, amplifying the dust's explosiveness. The shockwave that formed on their impact gave her another small boost, while she was also creating a crater in the dirt below. She landed on the edge of the new pit and slid gently down the slope to the bottom. Coco crouched there for a second, listening. Someone was slicing through the trees above, sending branches raining down around her. She glanced up and saw a flash of red pass overhead. That had to be Fox Alistar, one of the possibilities on her list of potential partners. To her left, she saw another classmate, Iris Marilla, float down to the ground. That was a cute trick, but she was cute too, with those flowers in her hair, but Coco knew Iris had an annoying high-pitched voice that would get old real fast. Besides, Coco wasn't looking for a girlfriend, she was looking for someone who wouldn't hold her back or get her killed on the field. Someone who could keep up. Strap is more peerable than Pura? Oh god. Coco folded up her gun and sprinted away from Iris, up to the side of the crater and deeper into the forest, following the sounds of Fox's progress through the trees. Then she couldn't hear him anymore. She stopped, listening, wondering if he had landed badly, if she needed to save him. She thought that that would be a shame, especially because it would mean that she had misjudged him. But no, there was a springing sound silently from the trees. He landed 10 feet from her, catching himself on his hands and one knee. Oh, so he did a superhero landing. Got it. He was facing away from her. His arm blades looked wicked sharp. People must always be giving him plenty of elbow room. Alright, you lose points for that one, Myers. Right, is your name? Myers. You lose points for that one. Fox turned around suddenly and looked straight at her. Hello? He said. Coco waved. No reaction. She lowered her sunglasses so she could see him better. Oh, you're blind, she said. So much for her thorough research. Fox clapped his hands to his eyes. Oh no, he said. Why? Coco put a hand on the cocked hip and grinned. You are not what I expected. I like that. I'm Coco Adele. Fox Alistar. I know. Do you suppose this counts? First person you make eye contact with and all that. Fox asked. He aimed 2 fingers at his own eyes and then pointed them at Coco. Do you want it to count? Coco asked. You have an absurdly strong aura and you smell nice. Don't take that the wrong way. You can see auras, Coco thought? That's a high-level technique. So seeing aura is a technique. I guess you can sense people's power level in RWBY. Fox was turning out to be even more interesting than she had first thought. She could work with that. There's a right way to take it? Don't worry, Fox. I don't take offense easily, Coco said. Then I think this could work, Fox said. I was just thinking that. All right, shall we? Fox nodded. The headmaster's next set of instructions had been, after you've partnered up, make your way to the northern end of the forest. You'll meet opposition along the way. Do not hesitate to destroy everything in your path, or you will die. You will be monitored and graded for the duration of your initiation, but our instructors will not intervene. You will find an abandoned temple at the end of the path containing several relics. Each pair must choose one and return to the top of the cliff. We will regard that item as well as your standing and grade you appropriately. Let's find that temple, Fox said. You lead the way. He and Coco headed off together. And I think Fox he has milky white eyes, so it's always been implied that he's been blind. It was fan canon for quite some time. I mean, they do have scanners. They do have a way of sensing aura. It's built into the scrolls. So, I mean, Velvet had the perfect weapon in mind to help her land in one piece. She had surreptitiously pre-programmed her camera and Isadora with a photo of smiling Vega Blue, a classmate back at Fedo's combat school who had gone to Atlas Academy. She was glad she had, because her camera would have been much trickier to program while tumbling through the air. Now it was a simple matter to call up Vega's weapon, a pair of arm-mounted grappling hooks. As Velvet broke through the tree tops, she grabbed the controls of her weapon, accurately reproduced with hard light using special, especially expensive, dust from the Schnee Dust Company. Boom, baby! Ha! Velvet uses expensive dust as her primary weapon. I find that very amusing, because that was sort of a big deal I made with her revised weapon. So, I didn't get Velvet wrong, I just have her changed. I'm very proud of myself. I picked up on these things without doing anything else. She experienced only the briefest moment of disorientation before her semblance allowed her to mimic Vega's moves. And just like that, she was firing one grappling hook, swinging on the razor-sharp wire, firing the other hook, releasing the first, and retracting it, and so on, swinging effortlessly through the forest like a monkey, or at least precisely like Vega would have. Velvet wondered if her old friend was going through initiation at Atlas right now and what it was like. Grappling from tree to tree, Velvet gradually dropped closer to the ground. She kept swinging. A few times she caught a glimpse of a dark creature sniffing around below. She glanced behind her and saw branches breaking and foliage shaking with some of them began to follow her. Through the leaves, she spotted a pack of Borbatusks, and they spotted her. They gave chase. So that was about to become her next problem. She picked up speed, trying to stay ahead of them. But now she had something else to deal with. Her hard light weapon only lasted for a limited time, and her time limit had run out. Wait, what? Her hard light weapon had only lasted for a limited time, and her time had run out. Semicolon. His arms. I don't know. That seems like a typo. Maybe I'm missing it. The pages were stuck together. Can only criticize a book if the book isn't actually broken. Her time had run out, The grappling lines faded away, and while she was still 100 feet above the ground, she found herself plummeting again, but she managed to twist around and grab hold of a thick branch as she fell. The bough snapped, barely slowing her down. How thin are the branches in this forest? They're all pitiful. As she fell, the bough snapped, blah, blah, blah. She clutched the makeshift staff in front of her and managed to use it to bounce off a trunk that she otherwise would have smacked into head first. Her aura absorbed some of the blow. Jarred by the impact, she dropped straight down into the side of the tree, crashing through more branches that broke her momentum. Her aura continued to protect her from breaking any bones in the process, and she used the branch to push herself away from the tree and to avoid hitting any more, but now she was falling backwards, legs swinging, arms flailing, and hoping she could grab hold of something before she hit the ground. Velvet screamed. Yatsuhashi felt like he had... I need to take a drink before I begin this again. Yatsuhashi felt bad that he and his fellow students were inadvertently destroying the forest, but not bad enough that he felt he had to hold himself back. He drew Fulcrum, okay, that's a badass name for his sword, and swung the sword hard right to left, twisting his body and using the momentum to start spinning. "Yeah! Yeah!" he cried. I know it's probably more of a drawn out "yeah," but he's doing a spin move with a big sword. "Yeah! From now on, maybe I should do Yatsuhashi's voice as though he were Link, and just voice everything as "Hiya! Hit!" He held the blade out, flat side up, using it to slice his way through the trees as he spiraled downwards. Not so much a leaf on the wind as a helicopter seed, the kind that he loved dropping from heights as a child. The forest whirled around him. He burst into the clearing with a flurry of twigs and leaves. He focused on a sturdy tree in his path, seeing it loom larger in flashes as he continued spinning. He tensed his muscles at the right moment, and at the right moment he flipped around and plunged into the trunk, blade side down. "Sorry," Yatsuhashi mumbled. "Sorry," he mumbled to the tree. The sword embedded itself to the hilt in the tree and then slid downwards. He grunted as he held on, planting his feet against the trunk to slow his momentum further. The warped sword hilt grew warm. The wrapped sword hilt grew warm, then hot, then burning under his gloved hand. He hit the ground hard enough to rattle his teeth and staggered backwards, somehow maintaining his balance, even while dizzy from spinning. When he yanked Fulcrum from the trunk, the tree split in two and fell on either side of him. It screamed. That's kind of hilarious. The actual cut and plus, the screaming is obviously velvet. Yatsuhashi shook his head. Trees didn't scream. Then he looked up and saw a girl falling. He dropped his sword and ran towards her, leaping into the air. He leapt into the air. Leaped. Is it leaped or leapt? Either way, I'm confused. Leaped into the air. Caught her. That's a weird... Okay, so I want to go over this here. He dropped his sword and ran towards her. Period. Leaped into the air. Period. Caught her. That doesn't really flow. Just saying. "I've got you," he said. He landed with her in his arms, more gracefully this time. It was the fauness with the pretty rabbit ears. He flashed her a goofy smile. She scowled and looked away, shielding her eyes. "Put me down." She struggled and pushed herself out of his arms. She opened the box behind her and pulled out a camera. "You're welcome?" Yatsuhashi said. She cast her glance downward, rabbit ears drooping over her eyes. Then she sighed and looked up. "Thanks." "So I guess we're partners," Yatsuhashi said. He suddenly felt shy. "This is all a mistake," she said. Yatsuhashi walked back to the split tree and picked up Fulcrum. He checked it for damage. He knew where every scratch and ding in the blade had come from. He found the new one, a tiny dimple near the hilt that he would forever associate with today's initiation. "But those are the rules," Yatsuhashi said. "This isn't going to work," she replied. "Why?" he asked. "Because I'm a faunus and you're..." "What?" Yatsuhashi narrowed his eyes. She was looking at him the way people so often did, like she was scared of him, towering over her. His shoulders tightened, and he pressed his arms to his side, as if he could make himself smaller somehow, less intimidating. "You're from Mistral," she said. Yatsuhashi blinked. "So?" "Your people don't tend to like my people," she said quietly. She folded her arms against her chest and turned away from him. For her, the gesture worked, and she seemed to shrink a little. Yatsuhashi began. At the sound of his voice, the girl tensed. He lowered his tone as much as he could. "It's clear that people from Mistral have hurt you before. I'm sorry that you had to experience that." Her shoulders tensed, but she peeked over her shoulder at him. "I would never mistreat you because you're a faunus, or for any other reason. It's not who I am or who my mother raised me to be. And if I ever slip up and make a stupid joke or say something insensitive, you have full permission to punch me. So I can know how to do better. Be better." The girl looked over her shoulder at him, uncrossing her arms. "Can we start over?" He offered his hand. She nodded, ears bobbing up and down, and he turned to face him. "I'm Yatsuhashi Daichi." "Yatsuhashi Daichi," he said. She looked up at him, way up, and smiled a little. "Velvet Scarlatina." I can't do a frickin' accent." "Pleased to meet you." "Pleased to meet you," they both said at the same time. I don't know how I'm supposed to vocalize that. I'm not Chuck Norris. I can't harmonize with myself. I don't know what the fuck I just did. So if we're partners, I guess there's something you need to know," Velvet said. "What is it?" "There was a pack of boba tusks on my tail." Yatsuhashi couldn't help but check. Fauna typically only had one animal feature, but if she had said if she had a tail, she blushed, covering her ear. "Excuse you, I was a figure of speech." "Excuse you, it was a figure of speech." I have to work on my Australian accent. I can't do it. "Oh, guess that means I've earned my first punch." 3 boba tusks suddenly burst into the clearing in front of Yatsuhashi. Their large, curved, white tusks and bone mask with 4 red eyes looked eerie in the dim light filtered through the tree canopy. "Later, though," Yatsuhashi slowly brought his sword around. "Don't worry, I'll protect you." A bright light flashed. Momentarily stunned, when the spots in front of his eyes disappeared, he saw Velvet holding a camera. "What was that for?" he asked. Velvet pressed something on her camera, and a minute later she was holding a glowing, transparent copy of his sword. It should have said moment. Moment later. A minute implies a greater span of time than you intended. Was holding a glowing, transparent copy of his sword. Yatsu stared dumbfounded. "Don't worry," she smiled. "I'll protect you." I don't like that word, anime as art. I'm not a fan of it. "Check out that cave," Coco said. "Oh my god, people with American accents, I can do this one." Fox tilted his head questioningly. "Right. Well, it has all these drawings around the entrance of stick people attacking the big scorpion," she said. "So it's a Deathstalker den. Only an idiot would go in there." "Alright. I like that one," Fox said. "Yeah, just looks interesting. I'm more interested in finding the temple." "The temple should be just up ahead," Coco said as she climbed into a clearing. Fox marched forward. It really was hard to tell that he was blind. Coco watched him carefully, and even when he stumbled on a rock or a root, he quickly adjusted to maintain his balance without missing a beat. You had to be looking to even notice a misstep. Coco envied Fox's complete awareness of his body and how it moved in his environment. 4 people just left that area in a hurry, heading back to the cliff, Fox said. "How do you know that?" Coco asked. "I can detect other people's minds, just an impression of their consciousness." And Fox took his head and fell silent again. "Like when you can feel someone watching you?" Coco asked. "Sure," Fox said. He found it exhausting, carrying on a conversation speaking out loud. But it seemed like it was probably necessary for them to bond a little bit. They were supposed to be partners for the next 4 years, but it would be better if they were friends too. and they still had to face together whatever was at this Temple of Ozpins. Is this it? Coco asked when they arrived. Fox waited patiently. Oh, sorry. Coco walked forward towards the small ruin, Fox following. It's circular, with 6 pillars supporting a ring of stones above us. Careful, there are 2 steps up. Okay, we're standing in the middle now. Around 20 short pedestals with small stone slabs on them. Coco walked into one of them. It's etched like a playing card. This one's the Joker. Coco moved around the temple, examining the other tables. Here's the King of Hearts, the Queen of Hearts, Ace of Spades. The Ace of Spades! Some cards are missing. So our other teammates must have grabbed them. Classmates. Fuck. She tried to hide her annoyance, but Fox picked up that she would really bother they were already behind. You like being first, he said. And best. He nodded. Those aren't always the same thing or mutually compatible, but maybe you can still beat the others back if you hurry. Coco folded her arms. Pick a card, any card. Me? Go for it. Fox turned in a slow circle, then walked purposely towards the pedestal. That one's empty, Coco said. Try a little to your left. Fox adjusted his course and reached to take the stone card, King of Hearts. All right, let's go, she said. Fox tucked the card into a pouch on his belt. Then he held up a hand. We have incoming. He pointed behind Coco. 2 people were heading towards them fast, with a spinning black and white ball chasing them. Velvet Scarlatina, whom Coco remembered from Fedro's combat school, and Yatsuhashi Daichi, who generally walked softly and carried a big sword. I'll give that one to you, but careful quoting Teddy Roosevelt, all right? He's one of my favorite presidents. Where was I? Only now he was running, waving his sword to get their attention and shouting a warning. I guess we should help them, Fox said. I guess we should. Coco calmly strode to the top of the temple steps and flicked open her Gatling gun. Then she opened fire on the rolling Borbatusk. Yatsuhashi and Velvet veered out of the way while her bullets rained past them. As the rounds penetrated the Grimm's tough hide, she used her semblance to boost the volatility of the dust inside the bullets to blow them up and tear the creature apart from the inside out. You gotta define her semblance at some point, guys. I can't just keep guessing at this thing. Because it is just enhancing bullets doesn't seem very practical in the long run. On her application to Beacon, Coco had named her semblance Hype. For 3 favorite... Okay, so you're literally defining it as soon as I asked for you to define it. Thank you, novel. That's perfect timing. For her 3 favorite things in her life are fashion, explosions, and killing Grimm. And Beacon allowed her to combine all 3. Or maybe you're not defining it. Nice hustle, Coco, Fox said. But heads up. Coco threw herself back as the Borbatusk's decapitated head crashed into the ring of stones above her and then onto the temple steps. How did you know? She was cut off as one of the pillars fell to the side. She was gaining an idea of how abandoned temples became temple ruins. Yes, Fox talks. He also has telepathy, which is a weird combination, but hey, I ain't complaining. Velvet looked up at Coco as she hefted her Gatling gun. Oh, sorry. I need to finish Coco's segment. The Borbatusk's head rolled down the steps, and the red glow of its all-force dimmed. It evaporated into black smoke. And now I take a sip. Velvet looked up at Coco as she hefted her Gatling gun. Thanks for the assist. Oh, that was Yatsuhashi. Thanks for the assist, Yatsuhashi said, approaching the temple. Sure, Coco said. But why didn't you just smack that thing with your sword to knock it out of its spin? Yatsuhashi rubbed the back of his head. I didn't think of that. But hey, I did defeat 2 other ones before. Big ones. He spread his arms wide to demonstrate. Velvet put a hand on her hip and cleared her throat. Velvet got a few of them too, Yatsuhashi said. You didn't think to bat it? Like, come on, man. Coco stared at Velvet. She didn't even have a weapon. How did she... Suddenly, Yatsuhashi looked past Coco and assumed a fighting stance, sword at the ready. More company. Coco turned and saw 4 Ursai, large bear-like grim, armored in bony plates. I'll hold them off while you get the relic. Oh, I'll hold them off while you get the relic, he called the Velvet. But I can help, she said. We don't have time to fight all of them. All we have to do is get the relic and get to the top of the cliff. Is that all? She said. She supposed he had a good point, though. She raced towards the temple, vowing to return to back him up as soon as she had one of the relics. The guy in red with the arm blade sprinting past her on the... Thank God she didn't know his name. Like, I was wondering, like, they all know each other's names a little too quickly here. Sprinted past her in the way to help Yatsuhashi. Coco remained at the temple, her massive gun locked and loaded on the arriving Grim. Thank you for helping us, Velvet said to Coco. But we totally had that Bulbatusk when we wanted it. We just didn't want to miss all the fun, Coco said. I know you, don't I? From Pharos? Velvet Scarlatina. I saw you around, but we never spoke. I wish we had. I'm Coco Adele. Velvet figured she would just grab the first relic she saw, but when she realized that they were all stone tablets fashioned after a deck of cards, she figured it must mean something. She dabbled in fortune-telling when she was younger, and of the remaining cards, the only one that didn't make her nervous was the Queen of Hearts. She tucked it into Anizidora's box, where she stored her empty holographic plates. It was a perfect fit. But while she was busy doing that, Yatsuhashi and Fox had retreated, joining Coco and Velvet inside the temple, which was now surrounded by 8 Ursai. Funny that, how they multiplied. That's kind of unfortunate. Can anyone fly? Coco asked. No such luck. Then it looks like we'll have to fight our way out. Coco grinned and held up her gun. It's only 8 against 4. I like those odds. I don't believe in luck, Yatsuhashi said. He looked at Velvet. Got any ranged weapons? Coco looked at the box Velvet carried, wondering what was inside. Velvet shook her head. What if we attack them one at a time from here? I'm almost all out of bullets, Coco said. We could attack them in turn, Yatsuhashi said. Dart out, strike, and return? That would take all night, and more Grim will keep coming. I have a better idea. Where's the end of the chapter, I wonder? Oh, it's literally right around the corner. Velvet hated Coco's idea, but at least it had worked. It was only later when the 4 of them were assembling in the amphitheater watching the replay footage from their initiation that they realized how outrageous Coco's plan had been. They watched her open fire with her gun to clear a path through the ring of Ursai by blowing one of them into pieces, so Yatsuhashi and Fox could charge through first. Instead of trying to cut or stab the Grim that lunged for him, Yatsuhashi used his sword to knock it out of the way while Fox sliced through the creature in his path with his tonfa blades. Velvet stayed in the middle while Coco brought up the rear with covering fire, preventing the Ursai from closing the gap and attacking them from behind. It was fast and it was dangerous. It also played well for the crowd. Velvet knew that she had been keeping track where all the Ursai were for her team. Her voice was still hoarse from shouting warnings and directions to the others, while she fired off a hard light gun to keep any remaining Grim from off their flank. But on the video, it looked like her 3 classmates were protecting her the whole way to the stairs leading to the cliffs. More than one Beacon student commented on that, and her ears. So while Professor Ozpin announced they had named the 4-person teams, Velvet was looking down and feeling sorry for herself until she heard her name. Coco Adele, Fox Alistar, Velvet Scarlatina, Yatsuhashi Daichi, Professor Ozpin droned. Each of them looked up as their faces and names appeared on the screen and rearranged themselves. The 4 of you retrieved the Suit of Hearts, and from this day forward you'll work together as Team Coffee, led by Coco Adele. What? Coco and Velvet said together. The new team considered one another thoughtfully. Yatsuhashi looked up at their pictures. Team Coffee, he said. I'm a tea drinker, but I like the sound of that. Velvet did too. This is going to be fun, Fox said to his new teammates for the first time. Velvet yelped when she heard his voice in her head. Coco's mouth fell open. Yatsu looked as placid as ever, and as if he had been expecting all of this. So he did his research. I like that. Or was it Fox that did his research? No, it was Coco. They all did research. Screw it. Fox smiled and winked. Yeah, that's a thing I can do. I don't know how I like the end of that chapter. That's really sudden. He should have done that while they were talking in the ruins. Well, we're on chapter 3. I'm going to take a brief break so I can use the restroom, maybe get a refill on my drink. We'll be right back. I'm going to play an ad because I need money. And I got a super chat from Ash Barin 2 days ago, but I don't know if I ever covered it. Reboot RWBY with a better writer, consistent fighting scenes in your episode format would make RWBY godlike. If only, my friend. If only. All right, let's cut the break. I'll be right back. And we are back. Sorry, but I got myself a new glass of water. Still haven't cracked the bottle yet, but hey, we'll see what happens with that later. I wonder, let's see. So we got through, we started on page 41. We got through 24 pages. We can at least knock out chapter 3. But let's try and go for chapter 4, shall we? So that's what? 67 through 89. Ah, that's actually 30 more pages. Oh yeah, I don't know if I'll be able to, yeah, I don't think I'll be able to make it through chapter 4, but we will see. We will see. That's it's like 100 and something pages. It's 112 minus what I'm currently at, which is 67. So 67, 111. It's math. It's what it is. It's math, and it's evil. And you should never. Remember, kids, don't do math. Not even once. Chapter 3. And this is a nice outline of Yatsuhashi. So we know we have Yatsuhashi as the focal character. Yatsuhashi liked watching Velvet work with the townspeople at Feldspar. He was supposed to be helping her interview them, but he was never much of a talker, so Velvet took the lead while he lent quiet support, his specialty. Most of the other students at Beacon had the wrong impression of Velvet. She was only shy and reserved around people she didn't know, protecting herself from whatever harmful, hateful or hurtful things they might say. When she was with her team or hanging out with friends like Ruby and Weiss, she was more comfortable with herself. More comfortable, more herself, that's the phrase. And when she had a job to do, Velvet was great at connecting with new people. What did you do before the Grim attacked? Velvet asked. The young mother from Gossan, Amaranth, rubbed a hand over her eyes. I'm not sure what came over me. Ash started crying and crying and crying. She jiggled the infant boy in her lap, who giggled and reached up for Velvet's ears. And I felt this awful burning rage. I'd never felt anything like it before. I was so scared I was going to hurt him, and then I started crying uncontrollably. Amaranth's hands shook. Velvet put a hand over hers. Would you describe it as a wave of emotion? That's too British, too posh. Oh, you cheeky. I can't do... I'm going to struggle with this the entire read-through. Would you describe it as a wave of emotion? Velvet asked, echoing the words of many other people they had spoken to. Sort of. Amaranth shook her head. It was more like a dam breaking, only it didn't let the feelings in, it let them out. Like all the frustration and fear and anxiety I'd been holding in all flooded out at once. Yatsuhashi gritted his teeth. It sounded like a nightmare. Amaranth closed her eyes and tears rolled down her cheeks. Ash patted her wet face gently. She opened her eyes and smiled at him. It had been going on for a while, and once the emotions passed, all you were left with was guilt for feeling them, or anger. People would argue with one another over things they had said or done. Velvet nodded. We were always wondering when it would happen again, Amaranth went on. That's a mouthful to say, Amaranth. And it did happen over and over again, but the next time it was always worse. The feeling got bigger and blacker every day. Jealousy, regret, anger, sadness. Everyone was feeling it. Some more than others. Then the Grim came. We had to run, leave our homes behind. Some of us had left friends and family, people lost in the attack. We can never take back our last word or apologize to them again. Yatsu and Velvet had heard similar stories from all the recent arrivals at Feldspar. Amaranth and her son had come with dozens of others at the Gossan settlement, but some of their group had experienced the same thing in the schists and tuff settlements before that. And as I had seen the night before, whatever was happening was moving with the group and getting more powerful, spreading like an infection. It was at Feldspar now, and Slate estimated that they had a few days before the first massive Grim attacked. Before their first mass Grim attack. It was Beacon all over again. Not really. This is actually a radically different situation, the beacon, other than fear attracting Grim being involved. But that seems like a par for the course part of being a huntsman. Can you think of anything that connected these surges of emotion? Can you think of anything that connected these surges of emotion? Give me a velvet of Irish accent. Fuck. Can you think of anything that connected these surges of emotion? Did they happen at a certain place or a certain time? Was anyone else around? I'm not sure, Amaranth said. I think it happened most often at night, but usually I was alone. I mean with Ash, at home. Once it happened during the busiest time of the day at the market, and everyone was affected at the same time. That was terrible. A Ravager came for us that time. Thank goodness we had those huntsmen around. Ravagers were nasty, flying Grim, the uglier and meaner versions of a Nevermore, with dark leathery wings like bats. Yatsuhashi had seen them circling in the distant sky, but Team Coffee hadn't fought any of them yet. He hoped it stayed that way. Bertilac and Carmine helped evacuate. Amaranth blinked up at him as if she had forgotten he was there. Yatsuhashi briefly worried that he had accidentally used his semblance on her, but if he had, she'd have forgotten a lot more than Yatsuhashi's presence. He glanced at the kid on her lap. No, just like Yatsuhashi's quiet, reassuring presence helped Velvet be more outgoing, Velvet had a way of making Yatsu less intimidating. Seeing someone small like her with a big guy like him put others more at ease. Another reason why he hadn't attempted to interview anyone on his own. They made a good team. Perhaps Professor Osmond had known what he was doing after all when he paired up the teams at Beacon. That's debatable. The huntsmen were leaving anyway, Amaranth said. We just tagged along. As long as we kept up with them, they didn't mind. Much. Velvet frowned. I lost my best friend on the way. We lost the whole family. We're cursed, Amaranth said. Cursed. There was that word again. They had heard it so many times as they talked to people at Feldspar, who were now really people from Gazan and Schist and Tuft tribes. The survivors of numerous Grim attacks, all the way from the outskirts of Vacuo to be here. Amaranth's huddled posture said she was tired, defeated, hopeless. Yatsuhashi wanted to put an arm around her shoulder supportively, but better to leave that to Velvet. He had already made the baby cry when he got too close. Thank you, Velvet said. Don't worry, we'll help you figure this out. Amaranth smiled gratefully. Velvet and Yatsuhashi told everyone the same thing, and Velvet sounded so convincing that even he believed her. But they'd spoken to more than 40 people already, and they weren't any closer to figuring this out. He wasn't anyway. Velvet was making charts. Would you mind if I took your picture? Velvet held up her camera hopefully. Really? Amaranth wiped her tears away from her face. I'm such a mess. You look perfect. Velvet peered through the viewfinder and focused. Ash's face scrunched up. By now Yatsuhashi knew that meant that he was about to start bawling. Was another one of those emotional outbursts? No, just him being a normal baby. Shh, Amaranth sighed soothingly. Yatsuhashi held up his index and middle finger in a V behind Velvet's head, between her ears. Ash's eyes lit up. He clapped and burbled happily. Velvet snapped the photo. Tanya the Evil's novels is actually really good. I highly recommend them for anyone that wants to read them. They're a little esoteric in places, but they're definitely good overall. Yatsuhashi quickly pulled his hand back to his side and tried to look casual. Velvet turned and looked at him suspiciously. What were you doing? She asked. Nothing, he said innocently. Amaranth caught his eye and smiled. The next 5 interviews went much the same. They talked to the young newlyweds, Opal and Jasper, who had them marry in secret because it was too dangerous to gather so many people in one place. Cursed. Celestine was a school teacher from Schist, who was too afraid to go back to work when her classroom erupted into a violent argument. Cursed. A weaver named Beryl lamented the loss of her home and business when she tried to sell Velvet a new cloak to keep the desert dust off her. Cursed. Also, that cloak sounded very lovely, and Velvet should do it to get a new change of outfit. down the wrong tube. Wait, who are we talking about? Oh, God. Fucking... You're talking about SAO. Why are you talking about SAO? I'm reading RWBY right now. Focus on one bad franchise at a time, people. As I'm slowly choking myself to death. Exhausted, Yatsuhashi and Velvet joined Coco and Fox to share their findings with Slate. They found the mayor in a small tent near the center of town. 10 other people were waiting to talk to her. But when Coffee joined the end of the line, she waved them forward. Give us a few minutes, folks, Slate said with the waiting settlers. They didn't seem annoyed at the delay Yatsuhashi could have expected. What's this? Coco asked, gesturing to the small crowd. People like to tell me their problems. Slate shrugged. Even if I couldn't do anything about them, it's either that or a therapist and my ears free. But now Yatsuhashi knew most people in Feldspar and those who came with Slate from Goston. The people in Feldspar seem to have embraced you as their mayor, Yatsuhashi observed. I thought vacuums don't like authority. They don't. But there's a difference between being a leader who tells people what to do and a leader who cares about what they want. My job is to convince them that that more often than not, those are the same thing, Slate said. Coco nodded. Didn't Feldspar have its own leader before you arrived? Every settlement has and a tribe has a person or several people who wind up being in charge. Only your natural organizers are those who came to motivate others to do more than just scrape by day, looking out for themselves and their families. Slate glanced behind the team at the people waiting in line. She lowered her voice. The fella before me didn't want the job any more than I do. But someone's got to do it, and I'm just being honest when I say I know I'm the right one for it. How's everyone doing? Coco asked. Absorbing a bunch of new people always takes time. Right now, most folks are worried about Grimm. The Feldspar tribe had to start hearing out what happened to everyone from Gauss and Schiss and Tuft, and they aren't so sure they want us to stay here. Understandable. Coco took in the line of people, then looked around the settlement. Have you learned anything helpful yet? Slate asked. We're interviewing almost all the refugees. Their stories are similar, but other than the shared fits of uncontrolled emotion, the Grimm, and the evacuations, we don't know what else the incidents have in common, Coco said. Velvet thumbed through the spreadsheet on her scroll. Slate looked interested, so she tilted the screen towards her. I compiled the info to Olo interviews. The data suggests the emotional outbursts happen to everyone at the same time, but not necessarily with the same force. Velvet held up her graph showing the line rising from left to right. They're also happening with more frequency, with greater intensity, and lasting for longer periods of time. Velvet showed a couple of more charts illustrating the progression and then stared at her scroll thoughtfully. Slate blew out a breath. I don't need a fancy chart to tell me that. We need more time, Coco said. I'm afraid we're running out of it, Slate said. If this trend continues, this is only going to get worse, Velvet agreed. But it won't be long before everyone will have to migrate to another settlement again. It's also going to get harder to find settlements that'll take these people. Coco twirled a finger with a long lock of her caramel-colored hair. Feldspar had more than 100 people before you guys showed up. The next settlement certainly won't roll out the welcome mat, Slate said. Even with casualties along the way, we'll probably bring more mouths and bodies than we're willing to or be able to accommodate. Yatsuhashi was surprised at how dispassionately Slate spoke about losing people to Grimm. But that seemed to be the reality here. Not feeling every death personally was one of the hardest things he had to learn in his huntsman training, or at least not letting that loss paralyze him. Yatsuhashi was simply determined not to lose anyone ever again, but he knew all too well that one day he might fail, whether it was a stranger or one of his friends. Enough of Beacon Academy still stood a testament to the greatest loss. Velvet's ear perked up. What? Coco asked. I just realized. There is a common element linking all these incidents, Velvet said. The group waited and waited. Well? Slate asked. Was being dramatic, Velvet said. Coco turned a hand over, telling her to get on with it. The common element is the 4 people who came from Vale. They've been there for every attack. Fox face-palmed. Of course, he sent. The Caspians? Bertolek and Carmine, Slate frowned. Velvet spread her scroll wide and leaning on it, zipping through her notes. How long after they arrived did you start experiencing periods of heightened emotions? I don't know. We didn't think anything of it first. It was only when it really got bad that we realized something unusual was happening, and even then it didn't become suspicious until we relocated the schists and it all repeated again. But I think back maybe a few days? It's hardly a conclusive, but it's a start. Are you suggesting that one of them is causing all this? Slate asked. I don't know, Velvet began. But Yatsu and I haven't interviewed them. Neither did we, Coco glanced at Fox. Clearly we need to talk to them if they have any idea what could be causing the emotional surges. Good luck with that. They aren't the sharing type. The Caspians hired Bertolek and Carmine for protection, and whatever their faults, those huntsmen are serious about protecting them. From everyone. Isn't that just a little paranoid? Coco asked. You tell me. You're a huntsman. I figured it was part of your training. Slate leaned back. Either that or they're worried about thieves. Edward Caspian is obviously loaded, though money doesn't do you good out here in the good old desert. She pressed her lips together. Vacuums have a reputation for being dishonest, Fox explained telepathically. It's misplaced, particularly since it's in the other kingdoms who stole from us. The downside of keeping yourself unto yourself is that other people are free to tell your story. Yatsuhashi replied to the group telepathically. So I'm guessing Fox is more like a router for telepathy. That's very interesting. Fox tipped his head in acknowledgement. Where can we find them? Coco asked. They're staying in a sand shed on the north end of Feldspar. Like I said, they keep to themselves. Thanks, Slate. Slate spread her hands. See? I didn't do anything. I just listened, shared a little information, and you figured it out for yourselves. The job isn't so bad. She waved them off. Next! They left Slate to her supplicants, and huddled together in the night market. The moon was high in the western sky, a sprinkle of debris just visible on its edge. This should be one of the busiest times at the market. The fruit stand behind them could have been closed because fruit was scarce, especially with all the extra people to feed. But most of the flimsy wooden stalls were shuttered and empty. Clearly business wasn't booming. Yatsuhashi gazed at the boarded-up stalls. He suddenly really wanted to bite into a juicy breadfruit. What do you guys think? Coco asked in a low voice. Either Bertolek and Carmine aren't team players, which is odd for huntsmen, or they're hiding something. Excuse me, you mean huntsmen, the hired mercenary guns? The people that are literally sell swords. Team players? I don't know. That stands out to me as kind of weird. It seems to me that they wouldn't be team players from the get-go. I agree. We should be careful about trusting them, Coco said. Slate seemed to be a bit down on them herself, and she appears to be a good judge of character. You're just saying that because she likes us, Velvet teased. That's how I know she's a good judge of character. So here's what we'll do. Fox and I will approach Bertolek and Carmine, while Yatsuhashi and Velvet hang back a bit. Of course, Velvet muttered under her breath. Coco gave her a look but ignored the remark. Yatsuhashi placed a hand on Velvet's shoulder. He felt the tension in there, and then she relaxed. Wait for our signal, and then try to talk to the Caspians alone. Coco said. I'd like to see if their stories match up with what we've been hearing from the Vacuan nomads. Yatsuhashi and Velvet trailed a bit behind Coco and Fox as they walked north. Fox pointed out that the northern section, I think I stuck 2 pages together, of the brick wall separating the feldspar from the desert was taller than the rest and reinforced. Not many people live on this side of the settlement because of the wasting winds, Fox said. Velvet shuddered. What are those? What are those? Forceful sandstorms that come from the north. Even with a wall, the section gets hit pretty hard. Vacuans had exciting names for every natural phenomenon, most of them destructive or deadly. Misery's kiss, sunstroke. Lasting regret, food poisoning. Sudden demise, a sinkhole spontaneously forming which occasionally swallowed whole settlements. Dude, sinkholes are scary, man. They're freaking terrifying. Hang on, Velvet said. She patted Yatsuhashi's arm and dashed away. Keep going, I'm right behind you. Yatsuhashi whirled around in confusion, but Velvet was gone. He didn't like losing sight of her. What kind of trouble was she getting up to now? Ahead of him, Coco and Fox reached a small shed that had been conspicuously standing alone on the edge of town. Yatsuhashi leaned against the rough stone wall of a house 100 feet away, and watched as Carmine came out outside and began talking with Coco. Then Velvet was at Yatsuhashi's side again. Her sudden appearance made him jump. Here. She held out a skewer with a brown gooey mess on the end of it and looked at him expectantly. Yatsuhashi raised an eyebrow. The thing in his hand seemed to be food. In his hand seemed to be food. What's this? Breadfruit, she said. What happened to it? It was candied and caramelized. His eyes lit up. For me? He took the stick from her. I thought you might want to share, she said hopefully, steepling her fingers. He broke off a piece of the sticky ball and handed it to her. Velvet nibbled at it. This is better than it should be, Yatsuhashi said, licking his fingers as the sweet and salty flavor exploded into his mouth. Thank you. How did you know? I don't have to be a mind reader when I see you drooling at the fruit stands, Velvet said with a giggle. Don't drool, Yatsuhashi said. Velvet pointed to the corner of his mouth. He swept back the back of his hand to the same spot of his mouth and then wiped it away on his trousers. That was sweat, he said. You guys are up, Fox sent. Make it quick. Cute interaction, I like that. Coco and Fox were following Bertolek and Carmine away from the sand shed. How did you get them to leave? Yatsuhashi sent back. Coco said she wanted help to secure the perimeter, set up a guard against Grimm. Bertolek and Carmine are going to show us how. Yatsuhashi imagined how frustrating that had to be for Coco and Fox. They covered and mastered that exercise in Professor Green's stealth and security class in their second year at Beacon. That's it? Velvet sent. Coco also implied that guarding the Caspians here wouldn't do them much good if the Grimm breached the town. She basically volunteered us to be guarding. Bertolek and Carmine supported the idea, but I don't think we can keep them away long. Just let us know when you're on your way back. Yatsuhashi gobbled down the rest of his breadfruit. As Fox and the others disappeared from view, Yatsuhashi and Velvet hurried into the Caspian's door, which was covered by a dirty old blanket. Yatsuhashi looked for somewhere to knock, but the door was made of adobe, so he said, "Knock, knock." A moment later, the curtain pulled aside, and a boy said, "Is everything okay? Is everything okay?" Then he realized he didn't know them and said, "Oh." He was tan, maybe 11 or 12 years old, with a short curly black hair, dressed in jeans and a baggy t-shirt from the 38th Vital Festival tournament in Vacuo. "Hi," Velvet said. "I'm Velvet, and this is my friend Yatsuhashi." "Hello," Yatsuhashi said. "You're those new huntsmen," the boy said. "And you are?" "Gus Caspian." "Can we come in?" He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. I'm not sure. Is your grandfather here? Can we talk to him?" Gus's expression turned serious. "Now isn't a good time." He started to pull the blanket back over the entrance. "Nonsense!" An older man came to the doorway. He was hunched over, but at his full height, he would have been almost as tall as Yatsu. He was slender, not frail. He still had some muscle on him. His thinning silver hair was pulled into a short ponytail, and he had several days' growth of gray stubble. Yatsu thought he looked familiar, but couldn't quite place him. "We're about to have tea and play Gus's favorite game. Why don't you join us?" Why do I give myself such difficult voices to do? It's gonna drain my friggin' voice. "Yes, please," Velvet said. "Grandpa," Gus said, "it's almost time for your nap. You know how you get if you don't sleep." The man waved his hand. "I'll be fine. Come in. I'm Edward Caspian, and fellow huntsmen are always welcome in my home." Gets grumpy when he doesn't sleep. That's a hint. Now, this could be like the buildings in glass, and that's a red herring. But duly noted. He gets upset when he doesn't sleep. Could be something of note. Fellow huntsman, Yatsuhashi thought. The man ushered them in and directed them to a woven mat in the sand with a porcelain tea service set on a bronze tray. A deck of cards lay beside it. Yatsuhashi sat and folded his legs, trying to make himself smaller in the enclosed space. Velvet sat down cross-legged behind him. "Go get cups for our guests, Gus," Edward said. Gus glanced at his grandfather nervously, but then he scurried off. "You used to hunt?" Yatsuhashi asked. "Grim?" Edward smiled. "I used to do a lot of things. I haven't hunted Grim in a long time, but once a huntsman, always a huntsman until you die." He trailed off, his face went slack and his eyes lost focus. Yatsu had seen that look before and it made him anxious. "Sir, are you all right?" Yatsuhashi asked, leaning forward to touch Edward's arm. He wished he could give people back their memories as easily as he could take them. "Don't touch him!" Gus said. Yatsuhashi flinched and withdrew his hand. Is he all right?" Velvet asked. "It happens sometimes," Gus said. "Like a part of him goes away for a little while, but he always comes back." Gus put the cups down in front of Yatsuhashi and Velvet. He watched Edward's face with worry, then poured some tea. Velvet picked up her cup and breathed into the steam. "What kind of tea is this?" "Cactus leaf. Cactus leaf. It's the best we can do." Velvet sipped her tea. "It's perfect," she said. "Thank you." "How old's your grandfather?" Yatsuhashi asked. Gus slurped from the tea from his own cup. "He'll be 71 next month." It wasn't common for huntsmen to live that long, certainly not with all the body parts intact, but it seemed as if Edward's mind wasn't quite intact. He was in no condition to be traveling long distances, certainly not in a hostile environment like Vacuo. What could have driven them into the desert, and where were they heading? "Just the two of you? It's just the two of you?" Velvet asked. "Yes." Gus stared at the bottom of his cup. Yatsu found it strange that the Caspians had been toting things as delicate as teapots and these cups from town to town. It's almost more remarkable that the tea service had survived all the Grim attacks. There were a couple of leather chests in the small room, and in the corner was a buckler, a small round shield with a sharp metal edge. The kind of weapon a huntsman would carry. "It's been just us since my parents were killed by Grim," Gus swallowed hard. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Velvet said. Gus blinked back tears and nodded. Yatsuhashi was surprised to see that Velvet was crying. He was even more surprised to realize that his own cheeks were wet. He felt sorry for the kid too, but he didn't cry often. Okay, so it's the kid doing it. It's happening again right now, Yatsuhashi realized. Tears were also streaming down Edward's face. "Velvet," Yatsuhashi cautioned. Velvet was typing on her scroll, likely using it to capture the first-hand experience. Anything to help the tribe get to the bottom of what's going on. "Is this how it always is?" Velvet asks. "The mood bomb?" Gus asked. She paused. "I haven't heard anyone call it that yet, but yes, I suppose that's accurate." Gus sighed. "It usually goes this way. Whatever you're feeling gets sort of amplified. You can't control it. If it hits critical mass..." Gus opened his fingers and made a whooshing sound. Boom. And then the grim, Yatsuhashi said. The mood bomb started back in Sumaya, right? Velvet said. That was the first grim invasion, and you escaped into Vacuo with the huntsman. Yatsuhashi looked at Velvet. They hadn't heard about any grim attacks in the Vale village. He quickly realized that she was bluffing, and that they knew more than they did. Gus craned his neck to see what was on her screen. Who told you that? Velvet's gamble was paying off. She obviously hit a nerve. Can you think of anything suspicious or out of the ordinary that started triggering these bombs? She asked. Gus opened his mouth. Anything that would help. Anything that would be helpful. Anything at all would be helpful. You see what happened when I get tired? I start reading weird things. Gus closed his mouth, shook his head. He's hiding something, Yatsuhashi thought. Maybe if they tried a different approach. You met up with Bertalik and Carmine in Sumire, Yatsuhashi asked. We were lucky they were passing through, Edward said. The old man had snapped out of whatever fugue he'd been in, and was carrying on as if nothing had happened. They defended the village from grim attack, and when I lost my girl and her husband. He paused to compose himself. Grandpa, Gus said. Edward kept talking. They heard us talking about wanting to leave, going somewhere on our own way, away from people. Carmine said that she knew a perfect spot, an old lighthouse on the western shores of Sanis. She said that she and Bertalik could guide us there and protect us along the way. But to get there, you have to cross the entire desert, Yatsuhashi said. Gus picked up the deck of cards. We playing or not? Gus nodded. Set it up, Gus! Yatsuhashi and Velvet exchanged looks. Gus laid out the cards face down in an 8x8 grid. Oop. Yatsuhashi tasted the cactus tea. It was a little weak, but still refreshing. Even with a couple of huntsmen, it seems dangerous to risk a trip like that, Yatsuhashi said. Especially with Grim following you from Sumaya, Velvet said. Once again, neither Edward nor Gus corrected her. You think I'm an old fool, Edward said. But better to have protection in Vacuo than no protection in Vale. Besides, the way things have been going, Vale isn't much better off these days. They've reclaimed Beacon. By the time this book rolled around, they have definitely reclaimed Beacon as per Volume 4, I believe? Edward leaned in and turned over one of the cards, which showed a picture of a Deathstalker. He turned over another, a Beowulf. Yatsuhashi used to play a matching card memory game like this when he was a little kid. Only the cards had been different varieties of flowers, not different types of grim. We don't think you're foolish, sir. We're just trying to understand why you're here, Yatsuhashi said. Why are you here? Gus asked. I ask myself that every day, Velvet said. She glanced at Yatsuhashi with a guilty expression on her face. Gus turned over 2 cards to reveal a Nevermore and a Deathstalker. Velvet turned over 2 Deathstalker cards and claimed the pair. Did you notice the mood bombs in Sumaya too? She asked. Edward looked around in confusion. His eyes began to glaze over. Grandpa, your turn, Gus lied. Edward slowly reached down and turned over the same card he had before, Beowulf. And then he stared at the board, frowning. What was I saying? Oh yes, Vale's having grim trouble these days too. At least in Vacuo, it's harder for them to track you because of the shifting sands. Vacuo still seems a bit extreme, Velvet said. Not if you want to get away from other people just as much as us. Just as much, Gus said softly. Then, why are you hanging out here? Velvet asked. Why haven't you moved on with Bertalik and Carmine? Grandpa won't let us, Gus said bitterly. Why is that? Yatsuhashi asked. We can afford to hire huntsmen for protection, Edward said. The settlements can't. As long as we're together, it's the same thing. Gus threw down his cards. But that's stupid when we're... He stopped himself. He seemed shocked at the outburst, or afraid. Gus, Velvet asked, when you're what? When when we're taking extra time to cross the desert, he sighed. Grandpa also can't travel as well as he used to. The desert's hard on him. He needs these breaks. He gestured at Edward again, who was muttering to himself with his eyes closed. You should try harder to get him to listen, Velvet snapped. Gus looked stunned. Yatsuhashi, you should try harder to get him to listen, Velvet snapped. Gus looked stunned. Yatsuhashi's eyes opened, shut up. Velvet? Don't start, Yatsu. Okay, calm down. Yatsuhashi raised a hand in a soothing gesture. You calm down, she said. Then she looked at him and started to laugh. That's funny. You're the chillest person I know. She began laughing hysterically. Yatsuhashi wasn't sure if it was any better, but it was pretty funny, and suddenly he was laughing too. Wait, this isn't normal. Tears were pouring from his eyes, but at the same time not from sadness. Even as he was feeling the lightness and joy of laughter, Yatsuhashi hated losing control of his emotions this way. He abruptly fell silent when Velvet carried on. Edward was chuckling to himself, but his eyes were vacant. Who knew what he was thinking at that moment? Gus was crying again, but his teeth were gritted and clenching his hands on his knees. This is bad, Yatsuhashi said sadly. This is bad. Are you guys all right? Fox sent. It's getting worse, Yatsuhashi sent. It's hilarious, Velvet said. You better come outside. We need your help, Fox said. Hurry. And we're on to chapter 4. I'm going to take another break. I'm going to use the restroom, but we are going to continue on because I think we can do the next chapter as well. It should only be, let's see, it stops at page like 111. We're 89, so it's like 12, 13, 14 pages, I think. Yeah, something like that. So we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Maybe to get yourself a drink. I'm going to use the restroom. I don't need to get any more drinks myself. So I'll be back quicker than you can shake a lamb's tail. We'll see how all that goes. So I'm going to play an ad now, and I'll see you guys shortly. And we are back, and we actually have a super chat to read. Anime is Art says, so we got a new legendary skin for Yang called Carmine, another small useless old bat that's comedy relief, and no mention of the headmaster of Vacuo. Yeah, no, that sounds exactly like Volume 6. Yeah. Well, let's jump right back into it. One more chapter for the night, folks. I do this for you. Chapter 4. And if you can see, got an outline of Fox on there. So now we're in Fox's perspective. I really like how they're doing that. It's a very nice touch. And it's the little details that matter in helping the book shape itself and become something original. I hope if they keep on doing these RWBY novels, and hopefully I'll be able to write one at some point, this is going to be basically similar. They'll do it with all of them. Chapter 4. It doesn't look like much, Fox, but I wish you could see it. Hardy palm trees arching over clear blue oasis, green bright leaves reflected on the still water. There's grass on the shore, lush green grass dotted with pink and white flowers. Bees lazily drift over them, collecting pollen. Do you hear them buzzing? This is the center of town, where everyone gathers to talk, eat, conduct business in the market. Around us are burlap tents and lean-tos built by traveling merchants. Beyond are the huts, squat shelters made of mud, brick, and straw everywhere where our people dwell. Every settlement in Vacuo was pretty much the same, not from lack of imagination, but because of the building materials available. Anything they could find, especially sand and stone, and practicality. It didn't make sense to commit so much time and energy to building structures that could be abandoned or wiped away by a sandstorm at a moment's notice. Vacuans lived extemporaneously, with little attachments aside from the people they cared about. And even then, many just weren't into commitment. With commitment came responsibility, and responsibility often made you weak and vulnerable. In Vacuo, those were two kinds of people. Those who were selfish and those who were fully dedicated to their community. And, in time, Fox came to understand that the latter usually had a better chance of survival. Copper hadn't been much older than Fox, more of a big brother than an uncle, but the Vacuan honorific also included mentors. Uncle Copper had done more than keep Fox alive in those early years. He had also trained Fox to fight when everyone else thought a wiry blind boy was just another liability. Fox remembered Copper's strong, calloused hands on his shoulders as he leaned over and whispered descriptions in his ear. He knew how much Fox hated loud noises. Fox, it's beautiful. Oh, shit, 1 minute. Fox is beautiful. Sneezes. Fox, it's beautiful. Though our homes are simple and elegant, they stand as testament to our sheer will to survive. The fact that anything can live in the desert is a miracle. And when the desert winds knock all this down, we'll just rebuild. When the monsters run us out, we'll just move and start anew elsewhere. Always remember that. Every life is precious, even if the mole crabs and the carrion hawks and the slow worms, all the more so here where there is so little of it. I don't know, that sounds like a politician speaking. Yes, Perfect Harbinger, I'm allergic to blind people. That is a new meme. Uncle Copper had been killed shortly after that conversation, not by a Grimm, but by one of those loners who wanted what he had, and was subsequently killed by the tribe himself as punishment. Then Fox had been alone, yet not alone, again, raised by the various kind souls in the Kenyete community. He moved with him until he was old enough to go to Beacon Academy. His 1.5 years at Beacon were the longest he'd ever spent in one place, and the happiest. Wait, hold on. They said that the Vital Tournament Festival, happened at the end of the year. So he should have had 2 full years at Beacon, not 1.5. But that ain't my opinion. That ain't my problem. His 1.5 years at Beacon were the longest he had ever spent in one place, and the happiest. Now it had all fallen to Grimm. It's no longer anymore. Again, I refer back to Port in Volume 4. He was talking about it. He was sticking with the family he had made there and looking forward to rebuilding. To the others, Beacon may have seemed like some kind of lost cause, but within its ruins was the foundation for something new. Believing that was a gift Vacuo had given him, Coco, Velvet, and Yatsuhashi had struggled with their way of life in Vacuo, and provided Fox with some perspective on his culture, which had also benefited from his time away. Living from moment to moment instead of planning for the next day, week, or year seemed strange to many outsiders, but it also made Vacuans appreciate things in those moments far more. Every meal, every conversation, every joke was a celebration of life, and even the sad and painful moments carried greater significance. This was one of those terrible moments. So this is how it happens, Fox thought. After hearing about the explosion of emotion that had been plaguing these poor people, and feeling some mild effects themselves in the last day, Fox and Coco were now in the middle of a full-blown panic. If they didn't act quickly, this chaos would escalate and draw the creatures of the Grimm from miles around. The nearby Grimm had to be on their way already. Even if the townspeople calmed down now, the amount of time Coffee had to solve the problem here was growing significantly shorter. "Calm down!" Bertilac shouted. "You fools are going to get us all killed!" "Cool it, Bertilac," Carmine said. "Put that mace away. You're only making things worse." "The hell I am!" Bertilac said. Fox searched for Coco. He knew her well enough to pick her out of a crowd, and it was even easier because she was above the crowd on a rooftop at the edge of the square. He leapt up lightly and joined her. He heard the chaos down below. People shoving and fighting in the alleyways, fists hitting flesh, bodies hitting the ground. Bodies hitting the floor! Out of the mess of the mines clustered below, on top of one another, Fox noticed some of them heading away from the crowd, heading out of the settlement. Not a bad idea if the Grimm were on their way, though they would be more exposed outside the village walls. "Are those people running away armed? Do they have supplies?" Fox asked. "No," Coco said. "Then they'll die in the desert or come crawling back later," Fox sent. I need to really blow my nose. I'm getting clogged up here. Sorry about that. Fox sent, and then they'll die in the desert, or they'll come rushing back here later, crawling back here later. Fox sent. And since they have fled instead of helping defend their settlement and the people, they might not be welcomed back so warmly. If there is a later, Coco said. Fox heard groups of people sobbing and arguing, shouting everywhere. This guy, okay, Myers has an interesting way of writing certain things. So Fox heard groups of people sobbing, arguing, shouting, period. Shouting everywhere. He likes his periods and then emphasizing on simple, small words. I find that an interesting writing style. I'm not particularly a fan of it, but it does stand out. And there were so many, they were so worked up, their thoughts so unguarded. He was even being flooded with snatches of their thoughts, impressions of their feelings carried telepathically to him and then amplified by whatever was causing this. As if his own feelings weren't enough to control. We're going to die was the most common thought from people around him. We'll be together again soon, Mariah, came another stray thought. Why aren't they doing anything? Where is Slate? My kids! I have to save my kids. We're going to die. Shut up! That thought was Fox's, and it wasn't until he heard momentary quiet in the square that he realized he had inadvertently mentally shouted at everyone in his immediate vicinity. They were probably more confused than cooperative, though. Ow, Coco said. Thanks for the headache. But that was good, Fox. What else you got? Fox put his fingers to his lips and whistled. The sharp sound cut through the still square. Okay, that works, Coco said. Everyone, please calm down. She stepped forward right to the edge of the roof. As long as we keep our heads, we'll have nothing to worry about. Many of you have gone through this before, and you know what you're feeling will pass soon. Murmurs of agreement from the crowd as the latest waves of emotion subsided. Everything will be all right. Short of Shade Academy, this is probably the safest place in Vacuo right now. You've got 6 huntsmen here to protect you. 7! A man shouted in a shaky voice. People laughed, and the situation diffused. Fox focused on the man. His mind was bright, burning brighter than most people's, but it was also flickering, like it was struggling not to go out. Through familiarity, Fox recognized that Velvet and Yatsuhashi were standing near him. Okay, so it was 7! Yeah, that's the old guy. Through familiarity, Fox recognized that Velvet and Yatsuhashi were standing near him, and there was another presence close by that was harder to pin down. It was almost as bright as the man's, but with dark spots and a constant turmoil. That had to be Edward and August Caspian. But then someone shouted, "Look!" Fox sighed. What is it, Coco? Coco didn't answer him. More people were shouting, and some of them were screaming in abject terror. Fox heard feet pounding in the ground, and sensed everyone scattering in different directions quickly. Coco, Fox sent. I've got this. Fox heard Coco's handbag transform into a Gatling gun. Isn't that overkill? Fox sent, his own panic rising out of control. He hadn't felt this nervous since their mission in Lower Chiron. I think it's just the right amount of kill. Coco said. I like that line. Oh, Alia Kurosaki. Thank you for subscribing. Hopefully these are popping up. I don't know if they're popping up on the streams. Then Fox felt it, an emptiness of thought and spirit, just over their heads. A grim. Everyone down! Yatsuhashi shouted. Coco opened fire. Fox covered his ears and turned away, wincing as the loud gunfire right next to him. Then distantly he heard the sound of her semblance-enhanced bullets hitting their target and exploding high above them. A grim wailed as it was torn apart. The crowd cheered and clapped. Then a moment later the cheers turned to surprised shrieks, followed by a thump and a squelching of flesh hitting the sand around them. It was raining grim gore. What was that? Fox sent. Ravager, Yatsu sent back. This is even grosser than the mole crabs, Velvet said. The grim parts are already fading, Coco said. She folded up her gun. Now that we have your attention, as I was saying, we'll keep you safe, but you have to help out too. Fox felt the surging anxiety of moments ago subside, like an outgoing tide on the beach. But where did those hidden feelings come from? And where did they go when they weren't being forced to the surface? She's right, Bertolick called out. We're here to protect you. But the best way to keep safe, Carmine said, to keep everyone safe, is to stay in your own homes when one of those mood bombs hit. Bomb is a great analogy for what happened, Fox thought. Gathering in crowds like this only causes more conflict, which makes the situation even more volatile, Carmine said. It might not be good, but it was the only natural to seek out each other when were scared and alone. Even under the best circumstances, when your feelings weren't being manipulated or magnified by some unknown force, it was hard to manage your emotions. Incredibly sensitive people like Yatsuhashi had mastered the art of keeping the feelings under control, while others like Coco could channel them into action. Velvet sometimes let her feelings get the best of her. Fox, though? Fox thought. And Fox? His lonely upbringing meant that he was getting used to showing any kind of feeling at all. That's an interesting thought. If you were raised to be solitary, would you necessarily feel emotion the same way? But what if there are more grim outside? What if there are more grim out there? A woman called. There definitely are more grim, but you can count on that, Carmine said. But we just need to work on keeping them out there while we're staying calm and collected in here. Maybe we should leave now, someone suggested, instead of waiting for them to attack. Then they'll just attack us out there, Carmine said, and we'll die. Well, most of you will, Bertolix said. It's better if we keep trying to figure out what's causing these emotional surges, Coco said. We're getting close, I know it. We've spoken to a lot of you already, but if anyone can think of a cause at these mood bombs, please speak up. Anything could be helpful. Anything could help save lives. Coco waited. No one? This probably isn't the time or place for this, Bertolak said. Bertolac said. The bottom line is we need to keep the group in mind. What's best for everyone, not just for ourselves, right? Right, Carmine said. I have an idea. Slate's voice carried easily across the square without need to shout. It didn't hurt that everyone was inclined to listen to her. First of all, thank you, Miss Adele, and thank you, Huntsman, for keeping us safe. I'd rather have pieces of grim stuck to my hair than find myself stuck in its craw. But don't they fade away? Do they leave remnants behind? It's confusing, though. They're discussing here whether or not it's going to stick around. That got a few laughs. She went on. I don't know how casual I like the feeling of this scene is. It certainly seems like there's a good cause to believe that something among us is causing emotions to run wild. It's like we're carrying a disease we keep infecting new towns with as we spread out. The crowd murmured in agreement and alarm. Slate held up a hand and they quieted. Now that we have 6 able huntsmen, no offense, Mr. Caspian, maybe we should consider breaking up into smaller groups, each one guarded by one of you, then spread out a bit. All of us can survive out in the desert a couple of days, right? Everyone made sounds of agreement. That's not such a bad idea, Carmine said. Thanks, Slate said wryly. In smaller groups, maybe we can isolate whatever is affecting these emotions. At first, Fox agreed to the proposal seemed worth considering. They had figured that one of the refugees from the first settlement, Tuft, might be responsible for the strange incidents that had begun here to spread to subsequent settlements. Splitting into smaller groups, each assigned to a huntsman or a huntress, could narrow down that search. But even if it would save lives and end the cycle of grim attacks, Fox didn't think Coco would go for it in a million years. I don't like the idea of using people as bait, Coco said. We would be minimalizing the risk for everyone. If the Grim go after one of the groups, they'll call for help, Slate said. As long as we're in range of the CCT support tower, Coco said. And if we're all in range, it would probably still be close enough for everyone's emotions to get affected. However, it wouldn't affect everyone equally, Velvet said. Distance does seem to be a factor in the intensity of the experience. It seems risky, Yatsuhashi said. The tension was thick in the air, maybe thick enough to pull in more grim. We should all stick together, Coco said. Isn't that what you do in Vacuo? Even large groups with 6 huntsmen is going to have better odds than a group of 30 with only 1 huntsman or huntress. Well, it's our call, Carmine began. Actually, it's my call, Edward Caspian said, since you work for me. Now is not the time to develop a spine, old man, Bertolac said. Grandpa, Gus said, hear them out. I've heard enough, Edward said. I'm with the young lady with the big gun. Separating the town would be a mistake. We're more powerful united. That's the way we did it back when I was an able huntsman. Okay then. Slate said. There are likely more Grimm in the area, Coco said. My team will start patrolling the border and sound the alarm if any of them get too close. Much appreciated, Slate said. And what will you two do? Watch Edward and Gus like we're hired to do, Bertolac grumbled. Page break. Let's see. Clown World is subscribed. Thank you for subscribing, Clown World. Well, I have a few pages left. Probably about 12. I was wrong. My earlier count was wrong. I was 21 pages or so that I should read. So my brain doesn't help with memory, math-related things. That's it, math-related things, not memory-related things. The people in Feldspar might have slept less well if they had known that one of their huntsmen on night watch was blind. On the other hand, darkness was no problem for him. Fox felt the tiny faint presence of assorted animals out there, dotting the landscape much like he was told stars pinprick the black sky. Most of them were in burrows just under the surface, sheltering deep where the sand was still warm as the night air dropped to below freezing temperatures. Fox was wrapped in his cloak and a thick fur blanket as he slowly patrolled the outskirts of the settlement. He was searching for, well, nothing. An absence of feeling, the lack of a soul, the yawning void that heralded a creature of Grimm. Then he noticed another mind out there, a person. No one should be wandering in the desert alone, especially at night. Whoever it was, their consciousness was dim. It could have been someone sleepwalking, a deadly habit in these parts, if no one was looking out for you. Fortunately, Fox was looking out for everyone tonight. And it seemed he wasn't the only one. He picked up another consciousness following the first, one he knew very well. Velvet? Fox sent? Where are you going? Fox was already heading for a position. I'm following Edward, Velvet said. I think he's sleepwalking or something. You didn't say anything to the rest of us? How? Fox's semblance came in handy, particularly with the team giving them unique strategic edge in combat, but the drawback was that no one could communicate with Fox until he initiated the contact and kept the connection open. How about your scroll? Fox sent. Oh, right. I forgot we could do that since we're close to the relay tower. Uh-huh. What are you really doing? Velvet was silent for a moment, but he kept waiting for a response. I've got this, she said. I can see in the dark better than anyone, and I know how to talk to him. We'll be back before you know it. I hope you won't mind a little backup. Yatsuhashi and Coco... I hope you won't mind a little backup. Yatsuhashi and Coco would kill him if he let anything happen to Velvet. Just me, okay? Thanks, Velvet sent. He understood why Velvet wanted to strike out on her own to prove herself not only to her team but also to herself. Growing up, Fox had been the outsider, the orphan, the little blind boy. His people had meant to be kind, but their overprotectiveness was stifling. Everyone but Copperhead underestimated his abilities and treated him as fragile, unable to take care of himself. Besides, if he told Coco that Velvet was out here, Coco would come charging out on her own. But she needed to stay where she was, keeping guard in the town in case anything got past Fox, and keeping an eye on Bertolic and Carmine, who they worried might try to ditch the settlement, job or no job. As much as the pair seemed to prevent Coffee from taking charge, they also seemed relieved to have a team draw their attention. They also had seemed relieved to have the team draw the attention of the beleaguered townspeople. Fox hurried in the general direction of Velvet and Edward, noting that Edward's mental impression was becoming faint, which probably wasn't a good sign. And on top of that, Fox began to sense nothing. That really wasn't a good sign. Grim, Fox sent to Velvet, moving in on Edward. I'll meet you there, Velvet responded. Fox noted Velvet picking up speed, closing the distance between her and Edward. She could move fast. Edward's consciousness nearly blipped out. Fox started running. He could move fast, too. Trouble! Fox sent. He reached Edward just behind Velvet,
He could barely sense Edward now. "How is he?" Fox sent. "He isn't sleepwalking anymore. Now he's just sleeping," Velvet said. "And breathing, thank goodness. He's out here in his PJs." Fox was surprised the old man had made it this far, passing out from the cold without any protective clothing. He pulled off his blanket and bundled it around the old man. He was heavy. "I'll take him." Fox stripped Edward over his shoulders. "Let's get him out of here before—" Velvet shoved Fox and Edward out of the way as something fast and large struck at where they had been standing. Fox grunted and spat out sand and blood. He laid Edward on the ground behind him. "It's a King Taijitu, Velvet said. "We need to lure it away from Edward." Fox heard her activate her hard light weapon, and then hit a heavy thwack as she hit the massive viper hard with whatever it was. The snake hissed and its scaly skin rapped against the sand as it drew back. Fox oriented himself towards the Grim and crossed his arms in front of him, making an X with his blades. He relied on his hearing in the still night and the gentle vibrations of the sand to follow its movement. "Can you see all of it?" Fox asked. "Just the white half," Velvet said. She knew better than to speak aloud when he was listening in the middle of a fight. Being able to communicate quietly, especially around Grim, gave them a nice advantage, even if it drained Fox and weakened his aura over time. There's your confirmation. We have a confirmation that semblances drain aura. Conflicts with quite a few things, but it's a nice confirmation to have nonetheless. The rest must be under the sand, Velvet said. That explained why Fox felt movement below his feet. It seemed like the snake was withdrawing above ground. "It's coiling the strike," Velvet said. He heard her snap a photo of him, then activate another weapon. He grinned, knowing she was now armed with the same way he was, with his own fighting techniques. Fox took in a deep breath. Yes, Fox and Velvet are getting frisky. Fox took in a deep breath, then darted forward, arms up, blades out. As he reached the King Taijutsu, he ducked and pushed himself forward even faster. He felt a breeze as the snake's head passed just over his own. He lifted his arms, cutting down the length of its body towards the trunk. Then he locked his arms in front of him, brought the blades forward, and fired their guns behind him for an extra boost, and sliced clean through its body. "Great!" Velvet sent. "The white end is gone, but the other end is—" The ground beneath Fox caved, sucking him under, and sand filled in around him, pinning his arms to his side. He felt hot breath from the remaining half of the King Taijutsu rearing up in front of his face. "My turn," Velvet sent. The King Taijutsu shifted to attack her, giving Fox his chance to dig himself out. He still couldn't budge his arms since the sand was packed in tightly, so he fired his blade guns. The explosive force cleared enough space for him to drag himself out of the pit. He rolled onto his back and squinted as sand blew into his face. A dust devil? No, it was just Velvet zipping by him and then up the length of the snake. He heard the familiar sound of sharp retribution, an echo of his own weapon, cutting through its steely scales. "Heads up!" Velvet sent. Fox scrambled to his feet, waiting for his cue. "And now it's coming down!" Velvet sent. The ground shook and sand blasted over Fox as the King Taijutsu's head slammed into the ground just in front of him. He dashed around to the right side and slashed a blade at the eye while it was stunned, then vaulted up to the other side. While he was on top of its head, the snake suddenly... While he's on top of its head, the snake suddenly reared up and Fox nearly lost his balance. He jammed his arm blades into its skull and held on. It did not like that. The fox thrashed around, trying to dislodge Fox as it raced around the desert. Bullets from Coco's Gatling gun followed it around. Coco was where? Was here? A bullet whistled just past Fox's ear. "Sorry," Velvet said. Velvet again, but without Coco's ability to enhance the strength of her bullets, her hard light gun couldn't do much damage on the King Taijutsu. Fox twisted his left arm blade, and the snake veered left. He twisted to the right and turned right. He could steer the Grim. The question was, where should he take it? Away from Feldspar, obviously, but he didn't know how long he could keep this up, and he just wanted to finish the Grim off. "The quarry," Velvet sent. "What about it?" "I meant the nearby Death's Quarry, not the Grim," Velvet sent. I would have assumed a quarry, not the quarry. "The stone pit just north of here. Isn't it weird that the same word means two wildly different things?" "So weird," Fox sent. "I'm gonna ditch our quarry in the quarry." No. Points off for that, Meyer. Points off for that. Bad joke. Penalty at the 5-yard line. He was already steering the half-blinded King Taijutsu towards the great stone pit near the town. Quarries like this one could be found all over Vacuo. Once upon a time, about a century back, they had all been part of a major mining operation. Once the corporations had leached the land from the dust that made it so valuable, they up and left, having helped the desert claim more of the land and leaving giant holes like this one. The snake didn't see the pit coming until it was already slipping over the edge. It flailed around, but it was falling down the side of the man-made crater. Wait, this is just the ending of Tremors! Ripping off Tremors for this, guys. What the hell? It flailed around, but it was falling down the side of a man-made crater. Fox pulled his tonfa free, turned up, and ran the length of the King Taijutsu towards the edge of a cliff. Just as he leapt off, the tail end of the snake lashed out and wrapped itself around Fox, pulling him down with it. "What?" Fox sent. He and the King Taijutsu stumbled down the canyon. Fox's arms were free, so he jammed them into the stone wall. Metal and stone screamed against each other. Sparks flew, and Fox thought that his arms were going to be yanked out of their sockets. But the blades held, and Fox's descent slowed and then stopped. The only problem was he had half a grim snake hanging from his waist. And it wasn't giving up without a fight. Fox couldn't hold on forever. "Velvet? Help!" "I can't get a clear shot from here," Velvet said. "I have to come down." "Never mind," Fox sent. "How far is the drop?" "Don't even think about it," Velvet said. "I can't see the bottom, so it must be a long way down." Fox gritted his teeth. He yanked the blade off his left arm out of the yanked the blade on his left arm out of the rock face and then aimed his gun at the stake wrapped around his chest and legs. His right arm was on fire as he supported the weight of both him and the King Taijutsu. He fired several rounds into the snake at point blank. The snake spasmed and squeezed tighter. That didn't work as planned, Fox thought. Cut the snake around your torso. The air was pushed out of his lungs and blood pounded in his head. He fired again, and slowly, incredibly slowly, the Grim loosened its hold on him. The coil around him slipped free, and the snake fell, spitting and hissing all the way down. It was a long time before he heard a distant crash of impact. Fox swung his left arm back up and grabbed a hold of a crevice in the rock wall. His shoulder joint popped, and he felt a stab of pain loosening his grip. A hand grabbed his. "Got you," Velvet said. "I told you not to climb down here," Fox said. "Good thing I did it anyway." Velvet tied a loop of rope around Fox and then scampered up the rock wall. It was the last time that he would underestimate her. She pulled on the rope, helping him climb back to the top of the abandoned quarry. "You okay?" Velvet asked. "Yeah, thanks to you. Hope there are no more Grim like that out there," Fox said, knowing that there were, and likely worse. King Taijutsu were just faster than many other land-based Grim, especially in desert terrain. They were running out of time. The increasing frequency and strength of the mood bombs were gathering Grim for another major attack. "How's Edward?" Fox asked. "Awake," said Velvet. Edward's mind seemed stronger now, but it was still fuzzy around the edges. "What am I doing here?" Edward asks. His voice sounded smaller, more frail than it had back at Feldspar. "Velvet? I want to go home." "We're taking you there." Fox and Velvet followed her and Edward's tracks back to Feldspar, supporting the man between them. It would have been faster to carry him back, but she urged Fox to let him walk. He didn't need to be embarrassed further. Fox had met very few people Edward's age, especially in Vacuo. But when you got to be that old, you had earned a certain amount of respect, and sometimes your pride was all you had left. Edward could walk, and though though he was freezing in his pajamas under a dusty old blanket, he deserved to return to Feldspar on his own 2 feet. "Someone's coming," Fox said. "It's Bertolac," Velvet murmured. Edward stumbled and nearly fell. He grabbed onto their arms more tightly. "There you are!" Bertolac bellowed at Edward. "What are you playing at, old man?" "Easy," Fox said, holding up a hand. "He's all right," Velvet said. "That's the important thing, right?" The important thing is not going off on your own without telling us," Bertolac said. "Especially not into the damn desert in the middle of the damn night." "I don't think he did it on purpose," Velvet said. "The hell he didn't," Bertolac said. "This is the 3rd time he's pulled a stunt like this." I'd run away from this ass too, Fox sent to Velvet. She giggled. "You find that funny, girl?" Bertolac asked. Velvet cleared her throat. "Sorry, I just swallowed some sand." Fox hid a smile. Bertolac reached for Edward, and Edward pulled away. Fox caught him. "We've got him," Velvet said. Bertolac was quiet for a long while. "Fine." Then he stepped back towards Feldspar. It was even more childish considering how futile it was to stomp in sand. Fox wiped at his brow. It was warming up out here in the waning dark, though dawn was still an hour away. "He's a bit hot-headed," Velvet said. "Something to keep an eye on." "I'll let you do that," Fox said. Velvet laughed. All of Feldspar was awake by the time they returned with Edward. Carmine, Gus, Coco, and Yatsuhashi hurried over as soon as Bertolac, Velvet, and Fox arrived. "I found him," Bertolac said cheerfully. Fox felt Velvet stiffen, but she couldn't correct the huntsman. "Grandpa!" Gus cried. Edward brushed off Velvet's and Fox's hands and embraced the boy. "Gus, I'm sorry, my boy." "He seems okay for now," Fox sent to Velvet. "Think he was pretending to be in worse shape than he is?" "I think he's pretending not to be," Velvet said. "He's trying to be strong for Gus." "What were you guys doing out there on what were you guys doing out there on your own?" Coco asked. "We had it under control," Fox said. "Well," Coco said. "Someone say something." "Coco," Fox said. "Velvet," he tried. Neither do we, Velvet said. But so softly, but Fox thought only he heard it. Then she had knelt beside Gus and patted his shoulder comfortingly. "Don't worry," she said. "We'll keep you safe. We'll get to the bottom of this before there's another attack." "I didn't mean to upset you, Gus," Fox said. "But you did need to hear that." Wait, what? Did I miss a page? Oh, shit, I missed a page. My bad. These pages, new books tend to do that. The pages stick together. Coco, Fox sent. Velvet, he tried. He was just when he sent his messages. Neither of them reacted. Then Fox realized he couldn't sense their minds either, or anyone else's. "That's strange," Fox said in a shaky voice. "My semblance isn't working." "You're probably drained from the fight," Velvet said. "We both are." "What fight?" Yatsuhashi asked. "Are you alright, Velvet?" What's going on here? Carmine and Bertolac woke up the village to help search for Edward, but you two were out there taking a walk with him?" "We were worried," Carmine said. "The desert is no place for an old man." "Which is why it's an interesting choice to take him there," Fox said. Everyone looked at him. "Oh, did I say that out loud? I meant to use my inside voice." Okay, that was funny. Edward wants to cross the desert, so we're taking him," Bertolac said. "And I'm tired of young punks acting like you know better than us. We've been huntsmen for a long time, ever since you kids were in diapers." "Hey, I'm not that old," Carmine said. "There's something weird going on with these two," Fox sent. He sighed when no one else reacted. His semblance was still in the fritz. It often weakened after extensive use, after pushing himself in battle. All he needed was some sleep and food, and a shower, but he wasn't likely to get that until they got back to Shade Academy. I'm just saying we have a lot of experience. I'd be happy to show this brat just how little he knows about fighting and survival in vacuo. I don't think he's got what it takes to be a real huntsman. None of you do." "Oh, really?" Coco said. "Please stop this. I'm just glad that my grandfather is back," Gus said. No thanks to Bertilac, Vox said. Isn't it your job to keep Edward and Gus safe? We're being spread a little bit thin here, trying to keep cover of 100 people, keep over 100 people alive, Bertilac said. But you're right. It's time we got back to basics. We'll take the Caspians out of here in the morning. No, Edward said. We're staying with these people. He just gets this way sometimes. He wanders off, Gus said. This won't happen again, Edward said. That kind of behavior gets you killed one way or another, especially in Vacuo. He would have frozen to death or have been killed by King Taijitu if we hadn't been there. If he keeps it up, one day he's not coming back, Fox said. Silence fell over the group, abruptly broken by Gus bursting into tears. He's not wrong, Bertilac said. Fox heard a slap and then Bertilac said, Ow! Fox, Velvet said softly, that wasn't very nice. Fox folded his arms. Nice gets you killed out here. Nice doesn't belong in the desert. These two don't belong in Vacuo. He gestured at Gus and Edward. Neither do we, Velvet said, but so softly Velvet thought only he heard it. Then she had knelt beside Gus to pat his shoulder comfortingly. Don't worry, she said. We'll help keep you safe. We'll get to the bottom of this before there's another attack. I didn't mean to upset you, Gus, Fox said, but you did need to hear that. I'm sorry, Gus sobbed. Nothing to be sorry about, Coco said. Just try to keep a better track of your grandfather. No, Gus sucked up snot. I mean, I'm to blame for all this. Blame for what? Velvet asked gently. Everything. The grim attacks. The evacuations. The mood bombs. It's all my fault. And that's where we'll end for this reading. Next chapter is chapter 5, which has the Beacon logo, which means I think we're going back to Beacon. So I'm excited to see that, because it actually looks like we're getting more of Ruby and Weiss in that chapter. Yay! Oh, man. That was interesting. I'm liking this book. I'm enjoying it much more than I've enjoyed a lot of the seasons of the show. Characterization is very strong across the board. I thought all the characters are coming across very, very good. Yeah, of course it's a semblance. I guess at the minute we saw them. It was one of their semblances, and it had to have been the kid, considering it was happening around his emotions. Now, there were a few things in there that I thought weren't quite as good. I'll get to them in just a minute. We did, in fact, have a super chat by Blade Charge. Velvet X Coco begging ship by Raymond X. No, I do not support Velvet X Coco. I am not a Velvet X Coco shipper. I'll support it if it's canon. It's not like I'm going to say it's completely off the table, but I honestly think it's a very pandering ship, personally. Velvet has much more chemistry with Cardin, and if Cardin had been a much better developed character, I think he would have made a better pairing for Velvet. That's my go-to, and it's sort of what I hint at with my Fixing Ruby, though I don't think I'll ever make it canon in that, unless we get deep enough that I can feel comfortable with that. Now, with that said, there was a few things in there, like, there are some scenes that seemed a little too calm for my liking, especially when they're just calmed down the entire crowd, and she made a joke and everyone laughed simultaneously at it. And while something like that can work, typically it's not something like that kind of blatant joke. It's a subtler joke that usually gets people to disperse the tension. So it's not quite. There's a lack of finesse in this novel that is kind of frustrating. There are things that were detailed in here that didn't need to be detailed. There are things that need to be detailed that haven't been detailed. Is Coco X Velvet Chocolate Rabbit? I think it is. Or maybe I think it's Hot Chocolate. I think it's Hot Chocolate, but I'm not sure. It could be Chocolate Rabbit. It's Crosshairs. Thank you, Perfect Harbinger. But there's other names for it. Every ship has like 4 different names. So I thought it's good. It's definitely better than a lot of the writing that Miles and Curry have done. So I'm wondering how involved they were with the writing of the story. And there are some breaks in there. There are some jokes that I thought were just too stupid, especially Velvet and Fox in the middle of a fight making quips about quarry and query, or quarry and quarry. That doesn't flow in the middle of a fight scene. Like that's the book equivalent of those freeze frames that people did in the actual show, where like the reaction faces that characters make when something surprises them in the middle of a fight in Volume 3. That's the equivalent of it. It's frustrating. It's definitely frustrating. That said, I'm going to call it here. Oh wait. I mean, it says on here that it's story by Kerry Shawcross and Miles Luna, right there in the title. Right there. See, so Kerry had to have some input on this at some point. We are a little over a third through the story, I believe. Yes, we are a little over a third into the story. So I'm eager to see where this goes. Okay. Well, thank you all. Can the writers create semblances that are useless or highly situational? Yeah. Happens all the time. I mean, just think of Crow's semblance. How is that useful for anyone? It's weird when they said they're going for a darker tone. I mean, it is a darker tone. We have people dying left and right. Even if it's only mentioned, dying left and right. We have actual list of casualty here. We have threat by Grimm. It's interesting stuff to me in that regard. And I'll just remember, I don't actually have an end card yet. I need to actually write up one of those. Perfect Harbinger. Crow exists. Well, all right. I've been drawing this out. I don't need to draw the end of this out even too much longer. I want to get on so I can actually do my Japanese. Thank you all so much for joining me. Thank you all so much for joining me. And I do hope you join me next time in the next stream in order to enjoy the wonderful works of RWBY. The next stream will hopefully be Tuesday of next week, but it could always fluctuate. Until then, please remember, if you wish to support the channel, like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell, and make sure your notification settings are active in your YouTube settings. On top of that, please remember that if you want to support me more directly, $1 or more to my Patreon will gain you access to the Team Frostbite Discord server, where myself, FamtanFalling, Tom Haran, and British Ninja are regular hosts, as well as good friends of ours such as Mediocrity and the always wonderful Dashi Lee. Thank you all so much for watching, and I shall catch you all on the next video. I wanted to say flip side, but I went next and I don't know why. Catch you all on the flip side.